Hi, and welcome to Colombian Jukebox, a space dedicated to culture and independent music made by Colombians, and I am Rebecca Leloy. I want to take the time right now to invite you over to our playlist on Spotify that is updated every 2 weeks with 25 new tracks made by Colombians. We also have presence on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, so go ahead and follow us on there. It's really simple. All you have to do is search for Colombian Jukebox, and I should be the first or second option that pops up. It's actually a good way to show your support for this space. I have also left the links of the social medias and the playlist in the description of this podcast. This edition of Colombian Jukebox has a Spanish version. So if you're interested, know Spanish, or are learning Spanish, go ahead and listen to episode number 4. And so here we are, ready to talk about a very special group with lots of swing. Espiral7 is a musical group from Cali, and they have a very unique style that represents the aesthetics of their hometown. And what is particularly interesting about their style is that it doesn't necessarily fit the stereotypical sounds of salsa that have characterized Cali in the last few decades. The band was formed in 2005 by sax player Harlinson Lozano and guitar player Andrés Sánchez. But before we go ahead and talk about their style, I think it's important to talk about the social contexts that surround the city of Cali. Colombia is a country of contrasts. There is a very clear distinction and separation of class, and you can feel it. So, in the first 2 decades of the new millennium, the middle class in Colombia seemed to be growing. But after what we all went through in 2020 with COVID, inflation, and new initiatives like the digital nomad visa that now allows working foreigners to stay in Colombia for up to 2 years, I feel that the middle class seems to be dwindling down again. This is just my opinion. I don't have numbers to substantiate this. It is what I see, it is what I feel when I walk around and talk to people. So keeping this in mind, and if we go back in time and remember, protests were rampant around the world beginning in 2020. I think that the triggers for them were the stagnant social conditions that prevail time and time again. And in the case of Colombia in 2021, in the middle of this crazy virus that had us all paralyzed for over a year, the government decided to propose a tax reform, and not in the benefit of the citizens. And this triggered a huge national protest, and I have to be honest with you guys, it was one of the scariest times that I have lived during my 5 years in Colombia. So Cali is the city in the southwest of Colombia that participates in this crazy socioeconomic polarity that we live in the country, and it was hit the hardest during the 2021 protests. Cali is the capital of the department of El Valle del Cauca, and if you're listening to me from other countries with different geographic subdivisions, think of department as a state, a prefecture, or maybe even a province. And there's just about 2.5 million people in the city, and it's home to several large companies like Nestle and Colgate. But the unemployment rate is really big. Cali has historically been a city of lots of migrants. I am not an expert in the history of Cali, but during colonial times, a large part of that migration was just transiting through the city. Cali is really close to Buenaventura, which is Colombia's main seaport, but as time passed by and the country kept on developing, the migration patterns changed. And these migration patterns have had a significant impact on their identity. But what is particularly different about the migration phenomenon in Cali today is its origins. Cali is the city hub of the forced relocation of the Black communities in Colombia. And this is due to the violence that is prevalent in Chocó and the South Pacific region of Colombia. So we all know, it's no secret, violence is very much a part of the Colombian narrative. It's deep and painful, and the scars that we bear as Colombians go far deeper than you can ever imagine. And no, Netflix series or Hollywood are not the places you want to use as reference to know what really went on or is going on in Colombia. But music can be your source. Stories are a big component of the music made by Espiral7. They tell and help us understand different kinds of realities that make part of the Colombian identity. Some of them are happy ones that we use to celebrate, but others are sad and painful, but necessary to tell so that we can process and heal. This next song that I will play for you is about one of those terrible moments that Harlinson Lozano, the group director, lived in a small town near Cali. La Guerra captures the voices and the despair of the violence. And stay tuned, because after this song, we will return and talk a little bit more about Espiral7. La Guerra makes part of their first album, Ciclos, released in 2018, and I think it's one of the most important songs of that album, and it really defines Espiral7's style. Espiral7's repertoire is very diverse. One minute they can make a Latin rock pop song, but the next they can have reggae with some electronic sounds, or maybe even something like the next song with Katie James, which flirts a bit with a bolero format. Katie James sings bambuco, which is a traditional music genre from Colombia. She was born in Ireland, but she has been living in Colombia with her family since she was 2 years old. Here is A Veces. Enjoy. That was beautiful. It was released in November of last year, and it made part of our playlist. And if you haven't done so, go check it out. I include songs like this one and update it every 2 weeks with new songs so that you can keep your personal playlist fresh and up to date. You can find it under Colombian Jukebox in Spotify. You can also find the Spanish version of this podcast in episode 4. So if you speak Spanish or are learning Spanish, I suggest you check it out. In it, Andrés Sánchez, lead singer and guitar player, talks to us a little about Espiral7, the rise of the new musical movement spiraling, pun intended, out of Cali, and their latest album. Espiral7 makes part of what they like to call the Neocaleño movement, and this movement steps away from the traditional salsa that has characterized Cali, and they mix jazz, Brazilian music, flamenco, rock, funk, and the sounds of the Pacific Region of Colombia into different points of views and different musical formations, like, for example, Break Salsa by Jacobo Vélez and La Mamba Negra, or the sounds of the Pacific and its staple instrument La Marimba de Chonta with Esteban Copete, and also the rhythms and the sounds of the city that Alexis Play is always giving us. Speaking of Alexis Play co-produced Formas, Espiral7's second and latest album, and I will leave you with one of my favorite songs from that album, but not before thanking all of you for listening. Colombian Jukebox is a labor of love, and you can show your support by following our playlist on Spotify and our socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Here is Vamos Lento. And until next time, my friends, take care, be safe.